the surface of the brain. This, what you are seeing, is the left side of the brain. This is the anterior, so your face would be over here, and this is the posterior side of your brain. Okay, so this is in the back of your head. And the first thing that we can see is the most distinctive feature of the human brain, and that is this very large region collectively called the cerebrum. So we can see that there are lots of little squiggles here, so there are bumps and there are grooves making up these bumps. Each little groove here is called a sulcus, and each bump in between the sulci are called a gyrus. Okay, so there are a few distinctive sulci and gyri, and so here we can see that there's actually a color change. This here, this fairly deep groove is called the central sulcus. Right before or anterior to the central sulcus is a bump that is in a darker red color that is called the precentral gyrus. And so this bump here, which is posterior or behind this groove, is called the postcentral gyrus. Okay. We can also see that there is a much deeper groove right here. Right? This deeper groove is called the lateral fissure. And if we look at the top here, we can see that the two hemispheres of the cerebrum are divided in half by a very deep groove. This is called the longitudinal fissure. Now we can use each of those distinguishing bumps and grooves to differentiate between what are called the lobes of the cerebrum. Okay. This here, again, is the central sulcus. Anything anterior to it is called the frontal lobe. What we can see here in purple, so from the central sulcus on back, this is called the parietal lobe. Inferior to the lateral fissure is called the temporal lobe. And finally, if we look all the way in the back here, we can see this all the way to the back of your skull. This is the occipital lobe. Okay. Now there are a couple different models here, a little bit less obvious on this brain. Okay, so what we can see again is the front, the back. All right, and so this here is the central sulcus, precentral gyrus, frontal lobe, postcentral gyrus, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, lateral fissure, and finally the temporal lobe. Okay, so that is all collectively the cerebrum. Okay, we can see a couple other features on these brains on the outside as well. All right, first of all, if we flip over the brain, okay, what we can see is on the back, on the bottom, there is a mini brain. We can see that the texture of it, or the topography, is a little bit different back here than it is in your cerebrum. This is called the cerebellum. Okay. What we can also see is the brainstem. Specifically, this smoother region right here is the medulla oblongata. This region that essentially looks like it bridges over the entire brainstem, this is the pons. And way back here, this is the midbrain. Okay, moving on up, this is the pituitary gland. Both of these here are part of the optic nerve. So this is the left optic nerve, this is the right optic nerve, and they collectively form an X called the optic chiasm. Okay. Here we see olfactory bulbs and olfactory tracts. So these essentially look a little bit like a cotton swab or a Q-tip. So the fluffy part of the cotton swab would be the olfactory bulb. The skinny part or the stick part would be the olfactory tract. Okay. Once again, back to this brain. We'll split it in half and look at just one side right here, because otherwise I won't be able to coordinate this. Okay. So on the bottom, here we see the cerebellum. This is the medulla oblongata, the pons, the brainstem. This here is half of the optic chiasm, olfactory tract, and olfactory bulb.